The day our world almost ended over a few boxes in a driveway. The fluorescent lights in Cedar Grove Hospital's waiting room had a constant, low buzz, a sound I think I'll hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. They cast a pale, sickly glow on everything, especially on my 8-year-old daughter, Emma. I held her trembling hand, feeling how small and fragile it was in mine. Her fingers were cold and weak, the skin almost translucent, but she held on to me with a desperate grip, using whatever strength her failing heart could muster. Before we get into this incredible, heart-wrenching story, I want to know who's out there listening. Comment below and tell me what country you're watching from. It always amazes me how stories can connect us from all over the world. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe for more amazing real-life stories like this one. "Daddy, it hurts," she whispered, her voice thin and reedy. Her lips were tinged with that terrifying shade of blue that had become our new, heartbreaking normal over the past 6 months. It was a color that spoke of stolen breath, of a heart struggling to do its most basic job. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer," I said, forcing a calm I was miles from feeling. I stroked the dark, damp hair back from her clammy forehead. "The ambulance will be here soon to take us to the surgery center. They're going to make you all better." Every word felt like a lie coated in hope. I was her father. I was supposed to fix things, but I couldn't fix this. I could only hold her hand and pray. Emma had been born with a congenital heart defect. It was a phrase we'd gotten used to, a shadow that had followed us since her birth. For years, we'd managed it with a cocktail of medications, regular checkups, and a constant low hum of anxiety. But 3 weeks ago, her cardiologist, the incredible Dr. Sarah Mitchell, had sat us down in her office. The news she delivered changed everything, shattering our fragile normal into a million pieces. Emma needed emergency surgery, not in a year, not in 6 months. Within the month, or she wouldn't see her 9th birthday. The surgery was scheduled for today at University Medical Center, a 2-hour drive away. It wasn't just any surgery, it was a complex 8-hour procedure that required a specialized world-class surgical team that only operated there. Dr. Mitchell had moved mountains, called in every favor, and pulled every string to get Emma on their schedule. The timing was beyond critical. Every single day we waited, Emma's heart grew a little weaker, a little more tired. My phone buzzed on the plastic chair beside me, the vibration startling in the tense quiet. It was the ambulance company. "Mr. Torres, we're about 10 minutes from your house to pick up the medical equipment for transport. Is everything ready?" A wave of relief washed over me. This was the plan, coming together. "Yes, it's all loaded in my driveway," I told him, my voice tight with stress. "The oxygen concentrator, the portable monitors, all of it. I'm at the hospital with Emma now, but my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson at 247 Oakwood Drive, has the key to the house if you need it." "Perfect. We'll grab it and head straight to you." I'd spent the last 3 full days preparing, checking lists, packing, and repacking. This wasn't a simple car ride. The medical transport was like a moving ICU. It required specific, life-sustaining equipment that needed to be collected from our home before they could even pick us up. Emma's oxygen tanks, her specialized cardiac monitoring devices, her meticulously measured medications, everything was neatly organized in sturdy, clearly labeled boxes in my driveway, ready to go. I'd triple-checked everything. It was the one thing I could control. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have imagined, was that while I sat in that sterile hospital room holding my dying daughter's hand, a different kind of nightmare was unfolding back at my home. That nightmare had a name: Karen Cunningham. Karen had been the president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association for 12 long years. In that time, she hadn't just enforced the rules, she had weaponized them. She'd issued 847 violations. She'd forced 23 families to remove swing sets and jungle gyms their kids loved. She'd made it her personal, full-time mission to ensure that every single blade of grass in the neighborhood met her exacting, unforgiving standards. To Karen, our neighborhood wasn't a community. It was a kingdom, and she was its queen. She was standing in her living room window that morning, her phone in one hand and her leather-bound violation notebook in the other, when her hawk-like eyes spotted the boxes in my driveway. "Absolutely unacceptable," she muttered to herself, her thin, unpainted lips pressed into a hard, disapproving line. "Garbage. Left in the driveway for 3 days straight. This is a blatant violation of Section 4.2, Paragraph B of the HOA covenant." She had been watching those boxes like a predator since the moment I placed them there. She'd already marched over and knocked on my door twice, her knocks sharp and imperious. But both times I'd been at the hospital, sleeping in a chair by Emma's bed. She left bright yellow violation notices taped to my door, but I hadn't responded. In Karen's mind, this wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate act of disrespect, a direct challenge to her authority. What she didn't know, what she refused to know because she never actually took a moment to talk to her neighbors as human beings, was that those boxes contained the very equipment that would keep my daughter alive during the transport to her life-saving surgery. Satisfied with her judgment, Karen marched across the street, her low heels clicking on the pavement with a rhythm that sounded like impending doom. She pulled out her phone and, with the diligence of a crime scene investigator, took 17 pictures of the boxes from every possible angle. Close-ups of the cardboard, wide shots showing their placement, everything she needed for her evidence file. Then she did something that would irrevocably change her life and ours forever. She called a junk removal company. "Yes, I need an immediate pickup," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "247 Oakwood Drive. There's been abandoned garbage in the driveway for 3 days. The homeowner has been notified and has refused to comply. I'm authorizing removal under HOA emergency powers." There was a pause on the other end. The man's voice was hesitant. "Ma'am, are you sure the homeowner is—" "I'm the HOA president." She cut him off, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I have the authority. I need you to come immediately." Within 30 minutes, a large white truck with West Side junk removal stenciled on the side rumbled onto our quiet street. Karen was already waiting in my driveway, ready to direct them with the confidence of someone who had never, in her entire life, been told no. "All of it," she commanded, waving a hand. "Every single box." One of the workers, a young guy in a grimy t-shirt, lifted a box that was clearly, unmistakably labeled, "Oxygen, handle with care, fragile." He frowned. "Lady, some of this stuff looks like medical equipment. You sure about this?" "I don't care what it looks like," Karen snapped, her patience thin. "It is a violation of community standards. Remove it." The workers exchanged a shrug. It wasn't their job to argue with the customer, so they began loading everything into the gaping mouth of their truck. The $3,000 oxygen concentrator that had taken me months to pay off. The portable cardiac monitor that Emma's insurance had fought me on for 6 months before finally approving. The carefully packed medications had been refrigerated at precise, life-saving temperatures. All of it thrown carelessly into the back of a junk truck, treated like yesterday's trash. Karen took photos of the entire removal process, already composing the self-congratulatory email she would send to the HOA board about her swift, decisive action against a problem homeowner. It never once occurred to her to knock on Mrs. Patterson's door and ask what the boxes were for. The thought that there might be a human emergency, a life hanging in the balance, never crossed her mind. In Karen's neatly ordered world, rules mattered infinitely more than people. Compliance was good, and compassion was a weakness. As the truck drove away, carrying my daughter's chance at survival, Karen returned to her perfectly kept house, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Another problem solved, another rule enforced. Back in the hospital, my phone rang again. It was the ambulance company. "Mr. Torres, we're at your house, but there's nothing here. Your driveway is completely empty." The words didn't make sense. They felt like a foreign language. "What do you mean, empty? I left everything there. Boxes clearly labeled with medical equipment. My neighbor has the key." "Sir?" The man's voice was firm, concerned. There's no equipment, no boxes, nothing. Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, came out. She says she saw your HOA president here with a removal truck about an hour ago. She says they took everything. The phone nearly slipped from my sweaty hand. I felt the floor lurch beneath my feet. What? Should we still come to the hospital? He asked, and I could hear the grim reality in his question. Because without that equipment, we cannot safely transport your daughter. She needs the oxygen concentrator and cardiac monitors during the 2-hour drive. The risk is too high. It would be reckless. I looked through the window into the hospital room. Emma had fallen into an exhausted, fitful sleep against my shoulder. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, each breath a struggle. We had a strict 4-hour window to get her to University Medical Center before the surgical team, the best in the state, had to move to their next patient. If we missed this window, Emma would be pushed back for weeks. Weeks she categorically did not have. I'll call you back, I stammered, my mind reeling. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial Mrs. Patterson's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice frantic with worry. Robert, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. Karen Cunningham came with a truck and took everything. She said it was an HOA violation. She wouldn't listen to me when I tried to explain about Emma. I told her, Karen, that's for the little girl. She's having heart surgery. She just kept saying, rules are rules, Carol. Rules are rules. Where did they take it, Carol? I asked, my voice tight with a panic I could no longer contain. I don't know. Some junk removal service. West Side something? Robert, I tried to stop them. I stood right there on my porch and told them it was medical equipment for a sick child. Karen looked right at me and said I was interfering with official HOA business and threatened to fine me too. I hung up, the world narrowing to a single terrifying point. I immediately called Karen's number. It was listed as the HOA contact on every petty violation notice she had ever slid into my mailbox. She answered with that crisp, self-important tone I'd come to loathe. Oakwood Estates HOA. Karen Cunningham speaking. This is Robert Torres, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and sheer terror. You just removed boxes from my driveway. Yes, Mr. Torres. Her voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. After 3 days of posted notices which you deliberately ignored, I was forced to take action. Those boxes contain medical equipment for my 8-year-old daughter, I nearly shouted, the words tearing from my throat. She has a congenital heart defect. She needs emergency surgery today. That equipment is required to keep her alive during transport to the hospital. There was a pause on the line, a long, infuriating pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, not toward empathy, but toward justification. Well, she said finally, her tone dismissive, you should have responded to my notices. The HOA covenant clearly states, My daughter is dying, I roared into the phone, causing a nurse down the hall to turn and stare. Where is the equipment? I don't appreciate your tone, Mr. Torres, she said, as if scolding a misbehaving child. This situation could have been entirely avoided if you had simply followed the rules. The equipment has been disposed of according to HOA protocol for abandoned items. If you have an issue with this decision, you can file a formal appeal with the board at our next meeting on the 15th of next month. The 15th of next month. The date echoed in my mind, meaningless and cruel. My daughter's surgery is in 3 hours. She will die without that equipment. Get it back. Now! I'm sorry, but that's impossible, she said, her voice cold and final. The removal company has already processed it. Perhaps this will serve as a valuable lesson about the importance of following community guidelines. Good day, Mr. Torres. She hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. I stood there, frozen in that bright, sterile hospital hallway, the linoleum floor cool beneath my feet. Behind me, in that room, my daughter was dying. And in that moment, I realized with chilling clarity that a woman who had never even shared a simple good morning with me had just signed my child's death warrant over lawn ornaments and driveway aesthetics. I felt a sob well up in my chest, a wave of utter helplessness. It was Dr. Mitchell who found me there, leaning against the wall as my legs threatened to give way, tears of rage and despair streaming down my face. "Robert, what is it? What's happened?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. When I choked out the story, the HOA president, the boxes, the junk truck, the phone call, I watched her expression transform. It shifted from professional concern to wide-eyed horror and finally settled into a mask of cold, hard fury. "Call the police," she said, her voice low and steady, leaving no room for question. "Right now. This isn't an HOA violation, Robert. This is a crime." Officer James Rodriguez arrived within 15 minutes of my frantic 911 call. He was a compact, solid man with a kind face and calm eyes. He introduced himself as a father of 3, and as I explained the situation again, my words tumbling out in a rushed, panicked jumble, I watched his jaw tighten and his eyes harden with a barely controlled anger. "Let me get this straight," he said, his pen poised over his notepad. "Your HOA president knowingly removed life-saving medical equipment for a child requiring emergency heart surgery because she thought boxes in your driveway were unsightly." "The boxes were clearly labeled," I insisted, my voice raw. "Medical equipment, oxygen, handle with care. She saw them. The removal workers even questioned her about it, and she told them to take it anyway." Dr. Mitchell stepped forward, her white coat swaying. "Officer, I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Emma's cardiologist. This surgery cannot be delayed. Emma Torres has dilated cardiomyopathy with an ejection fraction of 18%. In layman's terms, her heart is operating at less than a quarter of its normal capacity. It's failing. Every hour we delay significantly increases her risk of a fatal cardiac arrest. We have a 4-hour window to get her to University Medical Center." Officer Rodriguez looked from Dr. Mitchell to me. "Can we transport her without the equipment?" Dr. Mitchell shook her head, her expression grave. "Not safely. She needs continuous oxygen support and cardiac monitoring during transport. Without it, the stress of the move could cause her heart to stop right in the ambulance. Even if we could perform CPR, the chances of a successful resuscitation in that scenario are low. We could try to source replacement equipment from another hospital, but that process will take hours we simply do not have. And the oxygen concentrator alone costs thousands of dollars. It's not something we keep in surplus." Officer Rodriguez looked through the small window of the hospital room. He saw Emma, my little girl, sleeping fitfully, an oxygen cannula in her nose, her small chest rising and falling with visible difficulty. Then he looked back at me, and I saw the resolve solidify in his eyes. "I'm going to Karen Cunningham's house right now," he said, snapping his notepad shut. "This is reckless endangerment of a child at a minimum, possibly more. Give me 30 minutes. He didn't walk. He left at a run, his radio crackling to life as he sprinted down the corridor. Karen was in her immaculate kitchen, measuring loose-leaf tea into a porcelain strainer, when the police cruiser pulled into her driveway. She watched through her spotless window with a sigh of profound irritation. "What now?" she thought, her lips pursed. Had Mr. Torres actually called the police over an HOA matter? How dramatic, and how embarrassing for him. She opened her front door, fixing the officer with her most condescending, patient smile. "Officer, if this is about the boxes I had removed from 247 Oakwood Drive, I can assure you that I was well within my rights as HOA president. I have documentation of 3 separate violation notices posted over 72 hours. Officer Rodriguez didn't return her smile. His voice was flat and hard. "Ma'am, where is the medical equipment you had removed from Robert Torres's property this morning?" "Medical equipment?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Those were boxes of garbage that had been sitting in the driveway for 3 days. Mr. Torres never responded to my official notices. So I was forced to—" "Those boxes," he interrupted, his voice rising, "contained oxygen concentrators, cardiac monitors, and vital medications for an 8-year-old girl who needs emergency heart surgery in 3 hours. Where are they?" The color drained from Karen's face, leaving a pasty, shocked pallor. I didn't know they were. He should have labeled them properly. How was I supposed to? They were labeled properly, Officer Rodriguez shot back, stepping closer. Medical equipment, oxygen. The removal workers stated they specifically questioned you about it. Where did the equipment go? The company took it to their facility on Industrial Boulevard, she stammered, her confidence cracking. But surely Mr. Torres can just get more. I mean, if it was really that important. Ma'am, the officer said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. That equipment costs over $10,000 and can take weeks to source through insurance. Emma Torres will die without it. She will die because you removed life-saving medical equipment from her driveway. Now, I am going to ask you one more time. Where exactly is the equipment? Karen's hands began to shake uncontrollably. The reality was finally breaking through her wall of self-righteousness. West Side junk removal on Industrial Boulevard. But I didn't know. He should have told me. This isn't my fault. Officer Rodriguez was already calling for backup on his shoulder radio. Ma'am, you're under arrest for reckless endangerment of a child, theft of medical equipment, and criminal property damage. You have the right to remain silent. Arrest? Karen's voice was a shrill screech. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I was enforcing community standards. I have rights. So does that 8-year-old girl who is dying in the hospital right now, Officer Rodriguez said, his voice like iron. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. As the cold metal handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, the true, horrifying weight of what she had done began to crush her. The prim, perfect world she had built for herself was collapsing. But I didn't mean to. I was just doing my job, she pleaded, her voice breaking. The rules clearly state, the rules don't matter more than a child's life, ma'am. Not in my book. Within minutes, the quiet street was filled with the sound of sirens as 3 more police cars and an ambulance, summoned to help retrieve the equipment, raced toward West Side junk removal. Officer Rodriguez called ahead, his voice commanding, demanding they stop all processing and secure any medical equipment that had come in within the last 2 hours. I sat with Emma, watching the clock on the wall tick away the precious minutes of our window. Dr. Mitchell had gotten on the phone with University Medical Center, her voice pleading, begging the chief of surgery to hold the slot. They had agreed, reluctantly, but only for another 2 hours. After that, the team had to move on. The world didn't stop for one little girl. My phone rang. It was Officer Rodriguez. Mr. Torres, we found it. We found the equipment. Most of it is intact. The oxygen concentrator took a knock and has some external damage, but the facility manager says it should still function. We're loading everything into an ambulance now. We'll be at your hospital in 20 minutes. The transport ambulance is standing by. I couldn't speak. The relief was so immense, so physical, it stole my breath. I just sobbed, great, heaving sobs into the phone, my entire body shaking. Mr. Torres! His voice was gentle but firm. We're going to get Emma to her surgery. I promise you. Thank you, I finally managed to whisper, the words thick with tears. Thank you. When I went back to Emma and told her we were going to make it, that we were going to the special hospital, she smiled for the first time in days. A weak, tired smile, but a real one. It lit up her pale, drawn face. I knew we would, Daddy, she whispered. You always take care of me. The ambulance from West Side junk removal arrived exactly 20 minutes later, its lights flashing but its siren silent. Officers carried in the boxes of equipment, their faces set with determination. The transport medics immediately began setting everything up, their movements efficient and sure. Dr. Mitchell personally inspected every piece, her expert hands flying over the devices, checking connections, calibrating readings. The concentrator took a hit, she confirmed. But it's functional. It'll have to do. Everything else looks good. We can transport her safely. Emma was carefully transferred from her hospital bed onto the gurney and loaded into the waiting transport ambulance, now surrounded by the very machines that would keep her alive during the journey. I climbed in beside her. buckling myself into the small seat, and took her small, cold hand in both of mine. As we pulled away from Cedar Grove Hospital, I saw Officer Rodriguez standing alone in the parking lot watching us go. He didn't wave. He just gave me a slow, solemn nod, a nod that said, "It's in their hands now. Go." The surgery took 9 hours. 9 of the longest hours of my life. I spent every single minute in that waiting room, pacing, praying, staring at the wall, begging every deity I could think of for a miracle. When the doors finally swung open and Dr. Mitchell emerged, still in her blue surgical scrubs, a mask hanging around her neck, she was smiling. A tired, profound, beautiful smile. "Emma did beautifully, Robert," she said, her voice husky with fatigue and relief. "The surgery was a complete success. We repaired the defect. Her heart is strong now. She's going to have a long road of recovery ahead of her, months of careful monitoring and physical therapy, but she's going to be okay. Your little girl is going to be okay." I collapsed into the nearest chair, buried my face in my hands, and wept. I wept for the terror, for the helplessness, for the sheer, unadulterated joy of knowing my child would live. 3 days later, while Emma was resting in the pediatric ICU, her cheeks flushed with a healthy, rosy pink color for the first time in months, Officer Rodriguez came to visit. He brought a fluffy, brown, stuffed bear for Emma, who was still too groggy to do more than hug it and smile, and a thick manila folder for me. "Karen Cunningham has been formally charged with reckless endangerment of a child, theft, and criminal property damage," he told me, his voice low. "The district attorney is pushing for the maximum sentence. The junk removal company is also facing serious charges for not properly verifying the contents or ownership of what they were removing." "What about the HOA?" I asked, the institution that had enabled her to feel almost as culpable. "The HOA board held an emergency meeting last night," he said. "Karen has been unanimously removed as president and permanently banned from holding any leadership role within the association. Several other board members have resigned out of sheer embarrassment. The whole neighborhood is in an uproar. Apparently, this wasn't Karen's first incident of extreme overreach. You're not the first person she's bullied with her power trips. You're just the first one where her actions nearly resulted in a child's death." He handed me the folder. "This is for you. It's a documentation of everything. Karen tried to claim she didn't know what was in the boxes, but we have signed statements from the removal workers that they explicitly told her the contents appeared to be medical equipment. We also have Mrs. Patterson's testimony that she tried to intervene and that Karen threatened her. And we have the recording of your phone call where, even after you told her your daughter was dying, she refused to help retrieve the equipment." I opened the folder. The first thing I saw was the photos. High-resolution color pictures of the boxes sitting in my driveway. You could read the labels as clear as day. Medical equipment. Oxygen. Handle with care. Fragile for Emma Torres. Heart surgery transport. There was no ambiguity. There was no way Karen could plausibly claim ignorance. "What's going to happen to her?" I asked, my voice quiet. Officer Rodriguez's expression was grim. "The judge assigned to this case is not going to be sympathetic. In my experience, judges really don't like it when children are put in mortal danger, especially not for something as petty and ridiculous as HOA regulations. She's looking at significant jail time, massive fines, and I have no doubt your civil lawsuit will bankrupt her. Her lawyer is already trying to arrange a plea deal, but the DA wants to make a very public example of this case. He says too many HOA presidents out there think they're above the law. It's time to send a message." 6 weeks later, I sat in a packed courtroom, with Emma beside me in a new dress. She was still pale and weak, leaning against me for support, but she had insisted on being there. "I want to see her face, Daddy," she had told me, her young voice filled with a startling determination. "I want her to see what she almost did." Karen Cunningham sat at the defendant's table, flanked by her lawyer. She looked nothing like the imperious woman who had stood in my driveway giving orders. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a simple drab dress. She looked small, shrunken, frightened, and utterly broken. Her lawyer had managed to negotiate the charges down slightly, but she was still facing years behind bars. The judge, a stern, formidable woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Okonjo, read through the case file with an expression of barely concealed disgust. "Miss Cunningham," she began, looking over the top of her glasses, her voice echoing in the silent room. "I have been on the bench for over 30 years. In that time, I have presided over murders, armed assaults, grand larceny, fraud, every imaginable crime the human mind can conceive. But I have never, in all my years, witnessed such casual, breathtaking cruelty so carefully disguised as civic duty." Karen's lawyer started to rise. "Your Honor, if I may," Judge Okonjo held up a single hand, and he sat back down. "Let me be perfectly clear about what happened here," she continued, her eyes locked on Karen. "You were informed, multiple times by multiple people, that the items in Mr. Torres's driveway were medical equipment for a critically ill child. The boxes were clearly and professionally labeled. The removal workers you hired questioned you about it. Mr. Torres himself called you and explicitly told you his daughter was dying, and at every single opportunity to show even a shred of basic human decency, you chose instead to assert your authority. You chose the black and white letter of a rule over the vibrant, precious life of a child. Your Honor, my client deeply regrets her." "I'm sure she does now," Judge Okonjo's voice boomed, making everyone in the courtroom jump. "Now, after she's been arrested and charged, and her name and face have been splashed across the national news? But where was that regret when Mr. Torres was begging her to return the equipment? Where was that regret when she hung up on a father whose child was clinging to life? That is the moment that defines her character, not this performance today." The judge then looked directly at Emma, who met her gaze with the solemn, old-soul eyes of a child who had seen too much, too soon. "Emma Torres is 8 years old," the judge said, her voice softening slightly. "She should be worrying about spelling tests and playground games and what she wants for her birthday. Instead, she almost died. She almost died because someone thought the appearance of a driveway was more important than her life." She turned her steely gaze back to Karen. "Miss Cunningham, your actions were not merely negligent. They were malicious. You were told, repeatedly, that this was a life-or-death emergency, and you demonstrated a conscious disregard for that life. Therefore, I sentence you to 3 years in state prison for the crime of reckless endangerment of a child." A collective gasp went through the room. Karen let out a choked sob. "You will also pay restitution to the Torres family for $47,000 to cover the cost of replacement medical equipment, transportation delays, additional medical expenses, and the profound emotional distress you have caused. Furthermore, you are permanently banned from serving in any leadership or governance position in any homeowners association in this state, and you will complete 500 hours of community service at Cedar Grove Children's Hospital, where you will see, firsthand, the children whose lives depend on the very type of equipment you so callously treated as trash." Karen's sobs echoed in the now silent courtroom. She was a ruined woman. Judge Okonjo leaned forward. "Do you have anything to say to the Torres family before the bailiff takes you away?" Karen was helped to her feet by her lawyer. She turned to face us, her mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I never wanted. I was just trying to do my job, to keep the neighborhood beautiful." Emma looked at her, her small face serious. "You did mean it," she said quietly, but her clear voice carried through the room. "You knew I was sick, and you didn't care. You cared more about boxes in a driveway than about me dying." The simple, devastating truth of those words, spoken from the mouth of the child she had wronged, hit Karen like a physical blow. She doubled over, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands, her body racked with the full weight of her shame. Judge Okonjo banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned." The story, of course, spread like wildfire. it was picked up by the local news, then the national news. Headlines like HOA President Nearly Kills Child Over Yard Violation ran on every major network. Karen Cunningham became the national face of HOA tyranny, a living, breathing cautionary tale about what happens when petty authority meets absolute indifference to human suffering. The Oakwood Estates HOA was sued into oblivion. Our lawsuit was just the beginning. Once the story broke, a floodgate opened. Multiple families came forward with their own stories of Karen's cruel overreach. A family whose daughter's birthday party decorations were confiscated by Karen herself while the guests were arriving. An elderly man in a wheelchair whose medically necessary access ramp was ordered removed because it altered the facade. A single mother whose children's sidewalk chalk drawings were cited as property defacement, and she was forced to scrub them away with a hose while her kids cried. The HOA, drowning in legal fees and public outrage, dissolved entirely within the year. And in a final twist of irony, property values in the neighborhood actually increased once people realized they could live there without the constant threat of arbitrary rules and power-hungry officials. Karen served her full 3-year sentence. I heard through Officer Rodriguez, who kept in touch, that she was a model prisoner, quiet, withdrawn, spending most of her time in the prison library. She wrote me letters, dozens of them over the years, that I never opened. What could she possibly say that would matter? Sorry wasn't enough. Nothing was. Emma recovered fully. The surgery was a complete success. By the time she turned 9, she was running, playing, and laughing like any other healthy child. The physical scars on her chest faded to thin, silvery lines. The emotional scars took longer, but with time, love, and therapy, they too began to heal, though she never forgot what happened. On the first anniversary of her surgery, I took Emma back to Cedar Grove Children's Hospital, not as a patient, but as a visitor. We brought a carload of gifts for the children in the cardiac unit, new toys, books, and art supplies. We wanted to bring a little light to a place that held so much fear. In the bustling hospital lobby, we saw a woman in a volunteer's smock, organizing a pile of donated blankets. She was thin, her shoulders stooped, her hair now completely gray. She looked years older than she should have. She looked up from her clipboard, and our eyes met across the crowded room. Karen Cunningham. She recognized us instantly. The clipboard in her hands clattered to the floor, the sound sharp in the hum of the lobby. For a long, suspended moment, nobody moved. The air was thick with memory and pain. Then Emma did something that stole the breath from my lungs. She gently let go of my hand and walked over to Karen. She looked up at the woman who had nearly ended her life. "Are you helping the kids here?" Emma asked, her voice clear and calm. Karen's voice was barely a whisper, choked with emotion. I'm trying to make up for what I did. I know I never can, but I'm trying." Emma studied her face, those wise, too-old eyes taking in every line, every trace of regret. "Good," she said simply. "They need help. Lots of kids here need help." Then Emma turned, walked back to me, and slipped her hand back into mine. "I'm ready to go, Daddy." We walked away. I couldn't help myself. I glanced back over my shoulder once. Karen was still standing there, frozen, tears streaming freely down her weathered face, watching the young, vibrant girl whose future she had almost stolen. The little girl who had just shown her a grace she could never have imagined and certainly did not deserve. 5 years have passed since that terrible day. Emma is 13 now, a healthy, strong, and wonderfully normal teenager. She still volunteers at Cedar Grove Hospital herself, now as a peer supporter, helping younger cardiac patients navigate their fears and painful procedures. She tells them her story, shows them her scars, and gives them hope. She has decided with unwavering certainty that she wants to be a doctor, a pediatric cardiologist, just like Dr. Mitchell. The equipment boxes are long gone, replaced by insurance claims and legal settlements. But I kept one of the photos from Officer Rodriguez's folder, the one that showed those clearly labeled boxes sitting in my driveway. Medical equipment, oxygen, handle with care for Emma Torres. I keep it in my desk drawer, not to stoke anger, but as a solemn reminder. A reminder that rules without compassion are just tyranny in disguise, that authority without empathy is simply cruelty with a fancy title. That sometimes the most dangerous people in the world aren't the ones who break the law, but the ones who follow it without a conscience. Emma sometimes asks about Karen, usually around the anniversary of her surgery. "Do you think she's really changed, Daddy?" she'll ask, her head tilted in thought. "I don't know, sweetheart," I always answer honestly. "I hope so. For her own sake, I hope so. I forgave her," Emma said to me once, matter-of-factly. "Not because she deserves it, but I don't want to carry that anger around with me anymore. It's too heavy." At 13 years old, my daughter understands mercy and the burden of hatred better than most adults ever will. She understands that holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. She survived that day because of a chain of people, Dr. Mitchell, Officer Rodriguez, the medics, the surgeons. They cared more about her life than about protocols or rules. And now, she chooses to move through the world with that same profound, life-affirming care for others. Karen Cunningham, in her twisted, terrible way, taught us all a painful, invaluable lesson. That the letter of the law, without the spirit of love, is worthless. That positions of power are profound responsibilities, not personal rights. That every rule, every regulation should be weighed against its human cost. Emma lived, she thrived. Against all odds, she learned to forgive. And somewhere in that very hospital, a woman who once valued neatness and order over human life now spends her days pushing a cart of toys and blankets, trying to bring some small comfort to the lives she once so carelessly endangered. Whether her efforts are enough to redeem her soul, I will never know. That's not for me to judge. But I do know this. My daughter is alive. Her heart beats strong and steady in her chest. Her laughter fills our home with a music I will never take for granted. She runs, she plays, she dreams big, beautiful dreams of her future. And every single night, when I go into her room to tuck her in and kiss her forehead, I lean down and whisper the same 3 sentences, my personal prayer of thanks. You're here. You're safe. You're loved. That, in the end, after all the pain and the fear and the struggle, is absolutely all that matters.